I was driving through downtown to avoid the traffic with a burger in one of my hands and the steering wheel in the other. It was not entirely safe to be driving like this, but when you're running late and it's downtown, I think it should be allowed. Ah! I spit out the olive from my burger and stopped my car. I had specifically instructed them to put no olives in my burger, but I guess the olive just walked into it after being told not to. I walked to the large green trash can in the corner of the street and threw my burger on top of the already overflowing trash. As I started walking away, I heard a scurry behind me. I turned around instinctively and saw a teenager with a kid who looked about 5 on his shoulders, trying to reach my burger. I shouted, "Hey!" They looked at me, eyes widened with fear. "You're going to get hurt." I realized, I said softly, realizing that I scared them. A middle-aged woman limped briskly towards me. "Oh, they're just kids. Don't mind them, miss." I turned around, recognizing the sweet voice. "Bethany," she shouted, staring at me, shocked. "Aunt Feather? Why are you here?" I was so confused, seeing my old home tutor living on the streets with her kids. "Ma, do you want some?" the toddler asked her, handing her a quarter of the burger. She looked at me, embarrassed. "Why don't I take you guys to lunch? How does McDonald's sound?" I asked, smiling at her children when she began nodding her head in disagreement. I continued, "You can tell me about all of this there." "McDonald's, yes!" her younger son shouted excitedly. We got in our car and sped away. I was late for college, but I decided that this was more important. When we reached, I ordered a lot of food, some for them to take with them for later. "Why don't you come with me, Aunt Feather? I'm sure Dad won't mind letting you live in the outdoor house for some time," I said as soon as she was done eating. "Oh, I don't think that would be for the best," she stammered. "Oh, I'm sure he won't mind. I don't understand, though. Why are you living on the streets? Didn't you have an apartment in Brooklyn?" I asked her. "Oh, Beth, it's a long story, and a rather boring one. Let's let it be. Thank you so much for all of the food," she said, smiling, completely ignoring my story. "I have a lot of time," I said, pressing her to answer me. I was really curious and concerned about what happened to her perfectly healthy life. "Beth, I really don't think you will like my answers," she said in all seriousness. "I would still like to know," I told her. I wasn't ready for what she revealed. At first, I didn't believe her, but then she had all the pictures and texts, and I couldn't refute her proof. She told me that she was in a secret relationship with my father for 6 years. He had told her that he loved her and would eventually divorce my mom to marry her. In fact, her younger son, Arbor, was my stepbrother. However, when she had gotten tired of waiting on him and wanted to end it, he had sexually harassed her. She went to the police to report it, but since my dad was a big businessman and had so much influence, he had bribed the police to not even register her report. That's when things started getting really bad for her. My dad sexually harassed her multiple times, which also resulted in the limp in her leg. She threatened him that she would tell the news channels and tabloids to scare him away, but in return, he spread rumors about her, which got her kicked from all her tutoring jobs and her apartment. The people in her society didn't want to be associated with her anymore and pressured the landlord to kick her out. I sat in shock for a long time until she touched my hand and said, It's starting to get dark. You should go home and so should I. She got up to leave and I said, "Let me drop you." "There is no need. I will manage," she replied. "No, it's the least I can do," I said to her and picked up my keys. We drove back in silence, and after I dropped her, I wandered around in the car for hours until I finally decided to go home and confront my father. Perhaps he had a different version, anything that would make him look less like a monster. I walked into my dad's office while he was going through a pile of documents on his table. "Bethany," he said, looking up at me and taking off his glasses, "I have something important to talk about and I need you to be absolutely honest with me," I told him in a confident tone. "Of course," he said. I told him everything I had learned from Miss Feather. I also told him about all the texts and pictures I had seen. After an uncomfortable silence, he said, "Beth, you are young. These things happen. I didn't want to leave your mother and you. I didn't have the heart to hurt either of you. I told your mother about it, and we decided we can move past it." I raised my eyebrows and he continued, "The harassment? We were in a relationship. She just calls it harassment to gain sympathy. An ex-relationship? A present relationship? The lines are really blurry," he said. When he noticed I was about to protest again, he said, "Beth, I will have no discussion about this. The matter is closed. I don't care about her. I've given her enough money. She brought this upon her." "But, Dad, I saw the threatening text you sent her. And Arbor," I tried to reason with him. "Enough!" he suddenly shouted. "If you have so much sympathy for that woman, you may as well go and live with her. But I have a lot of work and I can't discuss these futile things to humor you," he said sternly. "I can go live on the streets?" I asked him, surprised that my father had said that. "Well, if you are going to continue this, then yes," he said angrily. "Fine, I will see you in court," I said, and started walking away. "Court?" he laughed. "Huh, you women, you think it's all so easy. You are an ungrateful bitch, just like Feather. It's no wonder since you spent so much time with her." I heard him as I walked into the hallway. I left the house crying bitterly as I drove my car around to a safe parking near the spot I'd found Aunt Feather earlier. I lay down into the back seat of my car for hours until the bright rays of sunshine breathed their way into my car from all of its windows. My mother had always been away on business trips, on formal parties. She was never there. Not now, and not when I was a child. I had never been close to Dad, but I always knew that he was around and that comforted me. But now, it felt as if I had lost both of them. Neither of them deserved my respect or compassion. I thought to myself, anger rising in the pit of my stomach. I bought some breakfast from a nearby cafe and walked around the area to look for Miss Feather. I found a small cloth tent in one of the narrow lanes and recognized Arbor's voice as he was throwing a tantrum. I walked towards it and called out, "Aunt Feather?" "Bethany?" she asked. I bent down to sit on the small mat they had in the tent. As I put the breakfast down, she said, "Oh no, Beth. I can't accept this." "They're hungry," I said, pointing to the kids. "And so am I," I added. I filled Aunt Feather on everything that had happened with Dad. I told her that I planned on helping her. At first, she was reluctant. She said that she had already tried, and with my dad's influence everywhere, it was impossible. But when I told her my plan, she was slightly convinced that it would work. "Are you sure you want to do this? He is your father. I don't expect anything from you, Beth," she said to me kindly. "Yes," I said to her, sighing. "I can't live with this secret, knowing that I could have helped. I said to her sadly. Aunt Bethany offered that I sleep in the tent, but I told her I was comfortable in my car. I made some calls, and finally, a local tabloid, The Talk in Town, agreed to take our interview. The next morning, I drove there with Aunt Feather. The tabloid welcomed us with snacks and drinks. They had found a dramatic story, and hence, they were more than eager to cover it. As soon as the article was published during the weekend, there was an outrage everywhere on Twitter and in our neighborhood. With all the building pressure, the police had no option but to file a report. The case was so public that we had a line of lawyers wanting to represent us at minimal wage and even for free. Our court hearing was to be held next week. I had been so busy with arranging everything that I had missed a lot of my classes. I was sitting in one of my extra classes late evening when my phone rang continuously. I finally excused myself and went out to pick up. It was Aunt Feather, and she was crying hysterically. Between the sobs, she told me that Arbor had passed away. The next few days went in a blur. I can hardly remember anything. I had grown close to Arbor as I was spending so much time with Aunt Feather. It was a difficult time for all of us. The whole town showed up for Arbor's funeral. I spotted my dad as well. He stood aloof in a corner, wiping his tears with a handkerchief, not interacting with anyone. I tried to approach him, but he walked away swiftly. Arbor had tried to cross the street on his own, and as Aunt Feather was rushing behind him, they had both been hit by a car passing by them at full speed. Aunt Feather had gotten injured badly, but she had recovered. However, the doctors had been unsuccessful in reviving Arbor. Our court date had also been postponed by 2 weeks because of the recent tragedy. It was a late evening, 6 days after Arbor's funeral, while we were having tea at a small apartment. Aunt Feather had rented with all the donations that had poured in after Arbor's death. Aunt Feather's phone rang. It was the local sheriff who was investigating the hit-and-run case of Arbor's death. Aunt Feather instinctively put the phone on speaker so I could also hear him, but the sheriff's next few words froze me down to the bones. I hoped that I was having a nightmare, but it was all real. He said that they found the driver of the vehicle, and he was a local goon who had been in and out of jail a few times. He had been instructed to hurt Aunt Feather to delay the court hearing, but he had not expected the child to be there. He had said that he had not intended to hurt Arbor. He also testified that it was Mr. Fun who was paying him. My father, Mr. Fun. The whole proceeding took a whole month. My father was charged not only for sexually harassing Miss Feather, but also for first-degree murder of his own son, Arbor. He didn't protest any of the crimes, instead, kept his head down, avoiding any eye contact. Arbor's death had probably given him a blow he hadn't expected. He was given a sentence of life in prison. I will probably never heal from any of the tragic events that have happened, but I have been doing my best to move on. I feel ashamed of my dad's crimes, but I know that they weren't my fault. Aunt Feather has stayed with me every step of the way. She made sure I never took the burden of my father's crimes. My mother had gone for an international business trip, and after everything that had happened, she had planned to never return to avoid the embarrassment back home. She didn't even want any contact with me, knowing that I had a part in it. Aunt Feather had regained all of her lost respect, and she was now working again. I decided to study criminal psychology and moved to a new city to get away from the ghosts that haunted me in the hometown. My course was going well, and I was topping my class. I had made a lot of friends as well. They had a lot of respect for the courage I had to go against my father. Perhaps it all worked out for me eventually. We aren't always born with the best families, so sometimes we just have to find ours.